Another 5 years and we not make the playoffs for 5 years straight, I'm totally fine with that. I'd rather struggle with the same guys that I succeeded with.
The Warriors are not in a good position now. They tried to get Giannis and didn't get him. They tried to get Anthony Davis, didn't get him. When it comes to this summer for Steph Curry, he is setting up for a very interesting decision.
Is the first time it is justifiable to entertain the conversation about him going back home.
Type Steph Curry's name into any search bar right now, and you'll immediately understand why NBA fans can't stop talking about him. Everywhere you look, there are edited images showing Steph in a Spurs uniform standing next to Victor Wembanyama, while betting markets and fan speculation continue pointing towards San Antonio as a possible destination. Social media has been taken over by non-stop trade machine posts, late-night roster breakdowns, and comment sections filled with people screaming "Free Steph" like a blockbuster move is already inevitable. And honestly, not too long ago, I would have laughed every single one of those rumors off as complete nonsense. For almost 20 years, Steph Curry's story has always seemed destined to mirror legends like Dirk Nowitzki and Kobe Bryant, one all-time great spending his entire career with one franchise. That's why those viral trade edits always felt more like fan fiction than something anyone should seriously believe. But then, everything shifted almost overnight as three massive developments unfolded in less than 2 days, and suddenly this conversation became impossible to ignore. The Warriors' biggest recruiting attempt in franchise history didn't end the way anyone hoped it would. At the very same time, one of the most respected insiders covering Golden State revealed that ownership has already started thinking about the organization's future beyond Steph Curry. And we're not just talking about next season, we're talking about the blueprint for life after the greatest player this franchise has ever seen. Then came the moment that really sent shockwaves through the basketball world. Steph Curry, a player known for staying positive no matter the circumstances, stood in front of campers at his basketball camp and used one unexpected word to describe his future: realist. You won't believe how much attention that single word received, because it instantly poured gasoline on every trade rumor already spreading across social media. For the last 17 years, Warriors fans have only had one nightmare: watching Steph Curry wear another team's jersey. But after everything that's unfolded this week, an even more unsettling possibility has started creeping into the conversation. Imagine Steph remaining in Golden State while the franchise quietly builds toward a future where he is no longer the centerpiece. That's the scenario every Warriors fan should be paying close attention to. The closest comparison that comes to mind is what happened with the Chicago Bulls back in 1998, when the front office had already begun planning for the future despite Michael Jordan still leading the team. Everyone remembers how that chapter ended, and history has a strange habit of repeating itself when organizations become too focused on what's next. That's exactly why these recent developments deserve far more attention than they're getting. So in today's video, we're going to separate the facts from the speculation surrounding these Steph Curry trade rumors. We'll break down why this story exploded across the NBA landscape and what it could realistically mean for Golden State moving forward. And just to be clear, I'm not claiming the Warriors are definitely trading Steph Curry, but after everything that's happened over the last few days, there's simply too much smoke to dismiss without taking a closer look. Now, if you've been focused on the LeBron James news and missed everything else, here's the background you need because it's a major piece of this entire story. Last Friday, LeBron wrapped up one of the most closely followed free agency pursuits in years by agreeing to a 2-year veteran minimum contract with a player option in Philadelphia. Golden State made a legitimate push. Steph Curry personally reached out, and Draymond Green even tried recruiting him while they were on vacation together. But in the end, it still wasn't enough. Now here's where the story becomes even more interesting. There are two completely different accounts of how close the Warriors actually came to landing LeBron, and the details couldn't be more contradictory. One version comes from anonymous league insiders, while the other comes from someone who may understand the situation better than almost anyone involved. According to an NBA executive who spoke with The Athletic, Golden State ranked only 4th on LeBron's preferred list of destinations. At the same time, a source close to LeBron told Peachly Sports that only 3 teams were ever truly in contention, and the Warriors weren't one of them. If that version is accurate, Golden State's pursuit may have been over before it ever had a real chance. But then Rich Paul entered the conversation and flipped the entire narrative upside down. Speaking on his podcast this week, LeBron's longtime agent firmly stated that Golden State absolutely belonged in the superstar's final group of 4. He even explained that each finalist held the lead at different stages of the process, and said the race ultimately came down to a complicated battle between Philadelphia and Golden State. That's a completely different version of events, and it leaves everyone wondering what really happened behind closed doors.
State at the end?
Yeah, it was pretty layered across the board.
Okay.
LeBron James' free agency decision wasn't wrapped up until the very last minute. Reports indicate he didn't make his final choice until nearly 1 a.m. on Friday, showing just how tight this race really was. So which version should people believe? Were the Warriors simply his 4th choice, or were they actually the biggest threat to Philadelphia? At the end of the day, though, every report leads to the exact same conclusion. LeBron James decided Golden State wasn't his next destination. But one part of Rich Paul's comments should still leave Warriors executives wondering what could have been. He explained that Philadelphia's decision to acquire Jaylen Brown on July 1 became the turning point that convinced LeBron to commit. That's the difference between a franchise waiting for a superstar and one willing to make bold moves to secure him. The 76ers recognized the opportunity, acted without hesitation, strengthened the roster with another elite talent, and that aggressive approach may have completely shifted LeBron's decision. Now go back to where this entire conversation began. The expectation was that LeBron would give Golden State serious consideration only if the Warriors managed to pull off a blockbuster trade for Anthony Davis and build another championship-level roster around Steph Curry. That massive deal never materialized, and as Brian Windhorst had previously reported, the chances of it ever happening were slim from the start. Sometimes the biggest stories of an NBA offseason aren't about the trades that get completed. They're about the blockbuster moves that never happen at all.
They're getting Anthony Davis.
What stands out most from this entire saga isn't simply that Philadelphia signed LeBron James, it's the strategy they used to make it happen. The 76ers took the aggressive step LeBron wanted by bringing in another superstar, while Golden State decided against making that same all-in move. That's exactly why Rich Paul's comments resonated so strongly with Warriors fans. Even as he praised Steph Curry and Draymond Green, he unintentionally highlighted the biggest weakness facing the franchise today. Rich Paul made it clear that virtually any superstar would jump at the opportunity to share the floor with Steph and Draymond. After all, these are 2 all-time greats who captured 4 championships together and transformed the NBA throughout the 2010s. But here's the reality that Warriors fans may not want to hear. You won't believe how different that recruiting pitch sounds in 2026. Golden State is still asking stars to buy into a future built around 2 legends who are already well into their late 30s. Less than 24 hours after LeBron officially announced his decision to join Philadelphia, Steph Curry showed up in Moses Moody's youth basketball camp. Ironically, Moody himself isn't expected back until sometime around the All-Star break because of his injury. That's where The Athletic's Marcus Thompson asked Steph the question everyone wanted answered. What was his reaction to Golden State coming up short in the pursuit of LeBron? Steph's answer wasn't filled with frustration or disappointment. It was something much more telling. He explained that situations like this are exactly why you never celebrate or panic until everything is finalized, because there are countless moving pieces behind the scenes. It didn't sound like the endlessly optimistic Steph fans have grown accustomed to hearing over the years. Instead, it felt like someone who had already come to terms with how things unfolded. As the conversation turned toward next season's roster, Steph's outlook became even more revealing. With Jimmy Butler expected to miss extended time and Moses Moody also recovering from injury, Steph admitted that health completely changes the outlook for the team. Then he delivered the phrase that caught everyone off guard: "I'm a realist." That simple statement carried more weight than weeks of trade speculation. Think about who Steph Curry has always been. This is the same player who spent his entire Hall of Fame career proving that the word realistic never applied to him. Down by 8 with only minutes remaining, most players would accept defeat, but Steph starts firing impossible threes. Defended 35 feet from the basket? Conventional wisdom says pass, yet Steph confidently lets it fly. For nearly 2 decades, he built his legacy by ignoring limits instead of accepting them. That's why hearing Steph describe the Warriors' situation through the lens of being a realist felt so significant. Marcus Thompson's reporting suggested that the disappointment over missing another superstar had already shifted into acceptance behind the scenes. According to the report, Steph had already made peace with where this team currently stands before most fans even realized it. And honestly, that's much more alarming than seeing him frustrated. The Athletic even portrayed Golden State as a franchise caught in basketball purgatory. Frustration usually means there's still hope that things can improve. Acceptance often signals that hope is beginning to disappear. That's an uncomfortable place for any organization with championship expectations. Last season's results explain exactly why those concerns exist. The Warriors finished 37-45, failed to secure a playoff spot after losing in the play-in tournament, and saw their season end against Phoenix in mid-April. 37 wins leave a team trapped in the NBA's toughest position, not talented enough to contend, yet not bad enough to land elite draft talent. That's exactly the kind of cycle every franchise tries desperately to avoid. And before anyone tries blaming Steph Curry for the Warriors' struggles, let's keep the facts straight. Even at 37 years old, he averaged 27.2 points per game while shooting an outstanding 46.8% from the field. Fans voted him into his 12th All-Star game as a starter, despite Golden State finishing 10 games below 500. That doesn't happen because of legacy alone. It happens because Steph remains one of the league's premier players. Then everything that could go wrong seemed to happen all at once. Jimmy Butler suffered a torn ACL against Miami, leaving him sidelined until roughly Christmas. Not long after that, Steph dealt with runner's knee and missed 25 consecutive games, a stretch where Golden State stumbled to an 8-15 record. Then Moses Moody tore his patellar tendon in March, effectively bringing his season to an early end. 3 significant knee injuries over a 3-month span wiped out any realistic chance the Warriors had of building consistency. Steph eventually returned and almost single-handedly carried the team through the final stretch of the regular season and into the play-in tournament, posting remarkable shooting numbers of 46.8% from the field, 39.3% from beyond the arc, and 92.3% from the free throw line. But even with that incredible production, all it earned Golden State was a short-lived postseason appearance before heading home early. One game from last season captured everything that was wrong with the Warriors. Steph poured in 48 points against Portland, a team far from the Western Conference's top tier, and somehow Golden State still walked away with a loss. Even one of the greatest scoring performances of the season couldn't overcome the problems surrounding him. If that doesn't show how badly he needs more help, nothing ever will. Following that defeat, one frustrated supporter emailed Golden State owner Joe Lacob, asking how much more Steph Curry was expected to carry the franchise. The fan questioned whether Steph would have to score 50 points every night just to give the team a chance to win. Surprisingly, Lacob personally replied, admitting he was just as frustrated as anyone else, while promising the organization was searching for answers. Keep that response in mind because it becomes extremely important later in this story. While the front office searched for a solution, one veteran made it clear just how badly he wanted another championship run. Draymond Green had a fully guaranteed $27.7 million player option sitting on the table, money he could have accepted without hesitation. Instead, he declined it because he believed taking a financial sacrifice could create more opportunities for Golden State to improve the roster. According to Shams Charania, Draymond turned down that guaranteed contract specifically to give Golden State greater flexibility in their pursuit of LeBron James and a potential Anthony Davis blockbuster that could form a new Big Four. Reports even suggested he was prepared to sign for less afterwards if doing so increased the chances of bringing LeBron to the Bay Area. That's a major sacrifice, especially from someone who has openly spoken about NBA players often being underpaid relative to their value. In this case, Draymond didn't just talk about winning, he proved it with his actions.
We work to accumulate wealth, and then you get fined the way we get fined. It's actually not set up for us to be wealthy after we're done. But if I do something wrong, I lose $100,000.
Honestly, if you missed my earlier video, it's worth going back and checking out because I believe it's one of the best breakdowns I've done on this entire situation. Watching Draymond Green complain about the fines he's accumulated over the years was genuinely entertaining, especially considering everything that's happened throughout his career. But buried underneath those viral headlines was a much bigger storyline that almost everyone overlooked. Reports tied to his contract negotiations also revealed increasing league speculation that Draymond
himself may have been included in potential blockbuster trade discussions involving another superstar. Just think about that. For 14 seasons, 4 NBA championships, and playing a huge role in building one of basketball's greatest dynasties, the Warriors were still reportedly willing to consider moving him if the right deal came along. And once you look at the situation through that lens, his emotional press conference from last season suddenly starts making a lot more sense.
At 13.5, but if it does, what a fucking run it's been.
Now, we know how this entire saga ended, and it's definitely not the outcome Warriors fans were dreaming about. The proposed Anthony Davis deal never gained real traction because, according to Joe Vardon of The Athletic, multiple league sources said Washington had no interest whatsoever in taking Jimmy Butler back as part of any trade package. LeBron James ultimately chose Philadelphia, and now Draymond Green, a 36-year-old four-time NBA champion and the defensive foundation of the Warriors dynasty, remains an unrestricted free agent. He turned down a guaranteed $27 million, believing Golden State would pull off a franchise-changing move, but in the end, that gamble simply didn't deliver. And what makes it even tougher is that LeBron wasn't the only superstar who slipped away from Golden State. During the very same offseason, Giannis found his way to Miami, Jaylen Brown was dealt to Philadelphia, and LeBron also landed with the 76ers. Those were the 3 biggest stars to change teams this summer, yet the Warriors failed to land a single one of them. It was as if the NBA's biggest superstar market in years opened wide, and somehow Golden State walked away empty-handed. That's a harsh reality for a franchise desperately trying to make the most of whatever remains of Steph Curry's championship window. But this is where the story shifts from disappointing to genuinely alarming. Just 48 hours after LeBron rejected the Warriors, Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard, one of the most respected reporters covering this franchise, shared a revelation on the TK show that completely changed the direction of the conversation. According to Kawakami, Joe Lacob's vision was no longer focused solely on improving next season's roster. Instead, he hinted that the organization had already begun thinking much further ahead, and honestly, that's the part every Steph Curry fan should be watching very closely.
Who wants to build the next team after Steph Curry? I don't know how possible that is. But Lacob has a very keen interest in this organization is going to show what it can do with Steph Curry and then after Steph Curry.
According to Tim Kawakami, Joe Lacob has already started thinking about something Warriors fans have dreaded for years: the future of the franchise once the Steph Curry era finally comes to an end. Take a second to let that really sink in. The comparison is hard to ignore because it echoes what happened with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, where the front office began looking toward the next chapter even though another championship run still seemed possible. That's exactly why this entire situation feels so uncomfortable. In many ways, it has the same uneasy feeling as The Last Dance, except this version may be even more difficult for Warriors fans because Golden State isn't entering the season as the overwhelming title favorite. Rather than pushing every chip to the center of the table for Steph Curry, the conversation has quietly shifted toward planning for the post-Steph era. And honestly, that's an incredible position for one of the NBA's most successful modern franchises to find itself in. The most surprising part is that Steph Curry hasn't shown signs of slowing down as an elite player. He's still Golden State's top performer, still earning All-Star recognition, and still under contract, yet the organization is already preparing for a future that doesn't revolve around him. You won't believe how quickly the narrative has changed. Kawakami didn't simply repeat what league sources were saying, he also gave his own perspective, and his analysis made the Warriors' long-term outlook appear even more uncertain.
He is good myself, but that's what he wants to do.
Compare everything being said today with the promises Joe Lacob was making just a few years ago. At that time, the vision was crystal clear. Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson would finish their careers together wearing Warriors uniforms. Fast forward to today, and that vision has completely unraveled. Klay is already in Dallas, and the reality looks nothing like the future fans were once promised. Earlier this year, Lacob even responded personally to a frustrated fan's email saying nobody was more disappointed than he was and assuring them he was working on it. But according to Tim Kawakami, that work is no longer focused on squeezing every remaining championship opportunity out of Steph Curry's career. It's about preparing for the era that follows him. Suddenly, that old message carries an entirely different meaning. Maybe the biggest question was never whether the front office was working, but what its true priorities had become. And before anyone dismisses this as an overreaction to one disappointing offseason, the truth is the Warriors have been following this path for years. Back in 2020, while Steph was still firmly in his prime, Golden State used the second overall pick on James Wiseman instead of flipping that asset for immediate help. Then, 1 year later, they doubled down by selecting Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody with 2 more lottery picks. Even then, plenty of analysts warned that the organization was trying to chase 2 completely different goals at the same time. That famous 2 timelines philosophy quickly became the identity of the Warriors' front office. The dream was for Steph Curry's championship years to overlap perfectly with the rise of the next generation. But 5 years later, the results tell a much different story. The future timeline is still alive, while the championship timeline has gradually slipped further away. The moves Golden State actually made only reinforced that philosophy. At the trade deadline, they reportedly moved Jonathan Kuminga, their final premium young trade asset along with Buddy Hield, to acquire Kristaps Porzingis. Unfortunately, Porzingis only managed to appear in a limited number of games, while Kuminga is now on the open market as a free agent. That's certainly not how anyone expected that gamble to end. During that same deadline period, another opportunity was reportedly available. A trade involving Michael Porter Jr. was discussed, but Steve Kerr wasn't convinced it was the right move. Throughout the offseason, the Warriors also chose to keep all 3 of their tradable first-round picks instead of using them in a blockbuster deal. The deeper you examine the evidence, the more obvious the organizational pattern becomes. That's why respected NBA reporters have started saying what many fans were already beginning to suspect. Golden State increasingly looks like a franchise preparing for the post-Steph Curry era, instead of pushing every remaining asset toward one final championship run. And honestly, that's the part that should concern Warriors fans the most. It helps explain nearly every major decision they've made. Just look at the pattern. Steve Kerr reportedly wasn't interested in absorbing Michael Porter's long-term contract. The front office protected valuable draft capital instead of using it to chase another superstar. Even the veteran contracts they handed out were structured with shorter terms and flexible options. None of those decisions reflect an all-in mentality. They all seem to point toward one target date, the summer of 2027. And this isn't just fan speculation. Reports from Shams Charania and Anthony Slater indicated that Golden State has intentionally preserved salary cap flexibility for the summer of 2027. Sam Amick also reported months earlier that maximizing financial freedom for that exact offseason had become one of the organization's biggest priorities. When you connect all the dots, nearly every financial move appears tied to that long-term objective. The logic behind that strategy isn't hard to understand. At one point, players like Giannis Antetokounmpo and Nikola Jokic were viewed as possible superstars who could become available around that time frame because of future contract situations. But now Giannis has already ended up in Miami, eliminating one of those dream possibilities. The Warriors may still be clearing the runway, but there's absolutely no guarantee another superstar ever arrives. Now here's the twist that makes this entire plan even more fascinating. Steph Curry's current contract expires during the very same offseason when Golden State expects to have maximum financial flexibility. In other words, the clean salary cap and the end of Steph's deal line up at exactly the same moment. That's too significant for Warriors fans to simply overlook. And what about all those draft picks the Warriors have refused to include in trades? Jonathan Givony has already reported that many NBA executives aren't especially enthusiastic about the projected 2027 draft class. One veteran scout even described it as one of the weakest groups of high school prospects he's evaluated in years. Imagine sacrificing the closing years of Steph Curry's prime for draft assets that might never develop into franchise-changing talent. So after missing out on LeBron James, Giannis, and Jaylen Brown, what was Golden State's biggest move this offseason? They selected Yeld Lendorf with the 11th overall pick, and to be fair, he has looked outstanding during Summer League. I never like putting too much stock into Summer League performances, but if you've watched him play, there's no denying the young man has legitimate upside. The problem is that potential doesn't automatically translate into championships today. The Warriors also re-signed veteran center Al Horford on a 2-year contract worth roughly $11 million, extended Kristaps Porzingis on a 2-year $40 million deal that includes a player option, and watched Quentin Post depart for Memphis. According to Jake Fisher, their remaining targets have largely been veteran minimum options, such as Kelly Olynyk and George Niang. Those are respectable depth moves, but they're a long way from the blockbuster offseason many fans were expecting. If you want a perfect example of what going all in actually looks like, just study Miami's approach. Pat Riley reportedly emptied almost every premium asset the franchise owned to acquire Giannis Antetokounmpo, including Tyler Herro, Kel'el Ware, Jaime Jaquez, multiple lottery selections, and future first-round picks extending well into the 2030s. Meanwhile, Golden State's version of aggression reportedly involved checking in on veteran role players. Those are two completely different philosophies. At the same time, the Warriors continued assuring Jimmy Butler that he remained a major part of their long-term plans. Anthony Slater reported that the organization repeatedly communicated they had no intention of trading him, while Butler's agent, Bernie Lee, publicly told ESPN that Golden State remained fully committed to supporting Jimmy throughout his rehabilitation and continuing their partnership. On the surface, everything appeared completely stable, but the timing makes the entire situation much more complicated. Those public assurances arrived on the exact same day Draymond Green opted out, a move Shams Charania connected to creating flexibility for a possible Anthony Davis trade. And in nearly every reported version of that trade framework, Jimmy Butler's salary was considered essential for making the finances work. So which version of the story was actually true? Either the Warriors were giving Jimmy Butler's camp promises they couldn't completely control, or those public statements were simply part of larger negotiations happening behind the closed doors. Brian Windhorst has even acknowledged that possibility himself. Neither explanation paints the organization in the best light, and it leaves Warriors fans wondering what was really happening behind the scenes. Jimmy Butler's own comments may have revealed more than anything. He openly admitted, "If I get traded, I get traded." That's not something you usually hear from a player who feels completely confident about his future with a franchise. Even after receiving public support from the organization, he still sounded like someone preparing for every possible outcome. To be fair, both sides of this story can be true. No front office has the power to force a superstar into choosing its team during free agency. And according to multiple reports, LeBron James' biggest concern was never playing alongside Steph Curry. It was whether the Warriors' roster as a whole was strong enough to compete for another championship even if he signed there. That's the difficult reality Golden State now finds itself facing.
Loser of the LeBron saga.
I'm going to say the Golden State Warriors.
It's his last chance for relevance, and it's gone. It is the saddest older NBA superstar situation since 2011 Nash on the Sun.
LeBron James's biggest concern ultimately became a reality the moment Jimmy Butler suffered that devastating knee injury. From that point forward, every question about whether this Warriors roster was truly built to compete for a championship suddenly had its answer. One injury changed the entire outlook, and the dream of another title took a massive blow almost overnight. At the same time, there's another side of this story that deserves attention. Jakob Lenderborg has been phenomenal since joining Golden State, earning Summer League MVP honors and helping lead the Warriors to the Las Vegas Summer League Championship. He's even had some fun joking with Draymond Green, reminding the Michigan guys that the Michigan guys are the ones bringing home the trophies now. You have to appreciate that level of confidence, and honestly, it's easy to understand why Warriors fans are so excited about his potential. But here's where the conversation becomes much more complicated. I really like Lenderborg's game, and I genuinely believe he has the talent to develop into a very good NBA player. The issue isn't the rookie, it's the timing of everything. When a franchise becomes captivated by the promise of tomorrow, it's easy to lose focus on maximizing the opportunities that exist today. And that's exactly why this situation feels so uncomfortable. Because while the organization seems increasingly invested in the future, Steph Curry is still chasing championships in the present. That's the question every Warriors fan should be asking. Is Golden State still doing everything possible to win with its greatest player, or has the franchise already started preparing for life after him?
So desperate just to waste the end of the Steph era. You already did this. You held on to Wiseman and Kuminga too long. Do they just think Steph can't be the best guy in a championship team anymore? 22 can never happen again.
Before we move any further, there's one final piece of the puzzle you need to hear because it completely changes how everything fits together. Pay close attention to Marcus Thompson's perspective on this situation. Trust me, the way he breaks it down connects so many of the loose ends we've been discussing, and once you hear his viewpoint, you'll understand why a growing number of Warriors fans are becoming genuinely concerned about where this franchise is headed.
I think he's probably a little tired of the star chasing.
Marcus Thompson has spent years covering the Warriors and is widely viewed as one of the reporters closest to the organization. So when he suggested that Steph Curry had finally accepted another superstar wasn't coming to Golden State, people took that seriously. Then, only a few days later, Steph's own comments to Thompson seemed to reinforce that exact impression. When a respected insider's reporting and a player's own words match up that closely, you can't help but wonder if there's a much bigger story unfolding behind closed doors. That's why the internet went into overdrive the moment reports about Joe Lacob's long-term vision started circulating. Warriors fans immediately flooded social media with trade ideas, trying to picture what a future without Steph Curry might actually look like. One of the most talked about fan scenarios sent Steph to the San Antonio Spurs, giving him another chance to compete for championships, while Golden State received a package of young talent and valuable draft picks. Another widely shared mock trade featured De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Keldon Johnson, and 3 future first-round selections heading to the Warriors in exchange for Curry. At the same time, betting graphics and viral posts began pushing San Antonio as the most likely destination if Steph were ever traded. But let's separate reality from social media speculation. None of those graphics came from Shams Charania or any other trusted NBA insider. No credible reporter has claimed Steph wants out, and no reliable source has reported that Golden State is actively exploring a trade. As things stand today, these are fan-generated ideas, not confirmed NBA news. That being said, if we're looking at it strictly from a basketball perspective, it's easy to understand why the Spurs keep showing up in these conversations. Victor Wembanyama is already viewed as the next generational superstar, and San Antonio just reached the NBA Finals, while still proving it could use another elite shotmaker when the game is on the line. Throughout Wembanyama's young career, perimeter spacing and late-game shot creation have remained the biggest missing pieces. Now imagine pairing the greatest shooter the game has ever seen with a 7'4" phenomenon. Defenses would face an impossible choice: leave Steph Curry open beyond the arc or let Wembanyama dominate the paint. There simply isn't a winning answer. On top of that, San Antonio possesses exactly the kind of assets required to make a blockbuster trade realistic. They have promising young players, one of the NBA's deepest collections of future first-round picks, and enough financial flexibility to build a legal trade package. From a pure basketball standpoint, the fit almost seems too perfect. There's even a bit of irony in the idea of the franchise once known for ending dynasties becoming the next home of the player who helped build the NBA's most recent dynasty. But that's all that remains for now, a fascinating hypothetical. No matter how exciting the idea may sound, there is still no credible evidence that either side is discussing such a move. At this point, the conversation is being driven by fans and social media, not by trusted league insiders. The other team that keeps surfacing in these rumors is the Boston Celtics, although that scenario makes even less sense in my opinion. Boston already moved Jaylen Brown to Philadelphia in what appeared to be a financially motivated decision, bringing back Paul George along with future draft assets. So if anyone still believes the Celtics are gearing up for another blockbuster trade, wait until you hear what Brad Stevens had to say,
because his comments paint a completely different picture.
Sitting here, if there was a rule in the CBA that said the guys that you drafted, you signed at 35% supermaxes count as 25% of the cap, because then that would allow you to build out towards the aprons with a lot more flexibility. But the reality is that those are hard to.
Now let's separate social media speculation from what trusted reporters are actually saying, because that's how we approach every story on this channel. A franchise that's working to lower payroll and preserve future cap flexibility isn't suddenly going to absorb a $62 million salary for a point guard who will turn 39 next March. Those Celtics edits rack up millions of views online, but financially, they don't make much sense. They're entertaining to look at, but they're still fan-made scenarios, not credible reporting. The reports from reliable sources tell a completely different story. Heavy recently examined whether Steph Curry could eventually ask out of Golden State, and the conclusion was straightforward: it remains highly unlikely. Even earlier this offseason, when Bleacher Report floated Steph's name as a theoretical trade candidate, the article itself admitted the chances were extremely slim. Every respected report still points toward one outcome: Steph Curry finishing his Hall of Fame career with the Warriors. Steph has also been very clear about what he wants moving forward. In an interview with the San Francisco Chronicle, he said he's eager to begin contract extension talks with Golden State as soon as league rules allow. Anthony Slater has also reported that the Warriors are prepared to structure an extension however Steph prefers. So despite all the online rumors, the franchise and its biggest star still appear to be working toward the same goal. So if we're answering the biggest question surrounding this story today, the answer is still no. There is no credible evidence suggesting Steph Curry is about to be traded. But there is one important detail that shouldn't be overlooked. Everyone keeps talking about staying together for the rest of his career, yet no new contract has actually been signed. And that's exactly where this story starts becoming much more interesting. Steph is entering the final year of his current contract, a deal worth $62.6 million that he signed in 2024 under the NBA's over 38 rule. Once this season ends, he'll become an unrestricted free agent for the first time in his entire NBA career. That means, for the first time ever, Steph could theoretically leave without Golden State receiving anything in return. That's a massive moment for both the player and the franchise. The first date every Warriors fan should keep an eye on is August 29, when Steph becomes eligible to sign another extension. According to Bobby Marks, the maximum contract available would be worth 2 years and $136.7 million. If Curry signs that deal immediately, this entire conversation disappears overnight. The trade rumors fade away, the Spurs edits lose all their momentum, and everyone can finally move on. But here's the part that makes this situation so fascinating. A full 2-year maximum extension would extend directly into the Warriors' carefully protected 2027 salary cap strategy. That's why Anthony Slater reported that Golden State is willing to discuss multiple extension structures, whether it's a 1-year premium deal or the full 2-year commitment. One option preserves the organization's long-term financial flexibility, while the other makes Steph Curry the exception to the entire plan. Pay close attention to which direction they choose, because that decision could reveal exactly how the franchise views its future. There's another important layer to this as well. Under the NBA's collective bargaining agreement, once Steph signs a maximum extension, he cannot be traded for the next 6 months. The moment that contract is finalized, almost every trade rumor instantly disappears until the following spring. In other words, one signature completely changes the entire conversation. Now imagine the opposite outcome. August 29 arrives, but no extension is announced. September rolls around, training camp opens, and there's still no agreement. Every day without a new deal would only make the speculation louder. At that point, the silence itself becomes the biggest NBA story. Think about how that would look from the outside. The Warriors publicly insist they want Steph Curry to retire in Golden State. Reports say the maximum extension is sitting on the table, yet the greatest player in franchise history still hasn't signed it. Nobody would need a trade request for difficult questions to start surfacing. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any public statement ever could. One national NBA writer has already pointed toward that exact possibility. If Steph becomes frustrated with the franchise's direction and chooses not to sign an extension immediately, it would naturally create the impression that he's leaving every option available. He wouldn't have to make headlines or issue dramatic statements. His decision alone would tell the story. And only then would all of those fantasy trade ideas suddenly become serious conversations. The Spurs possess the young talent and draft capital to make an enormous deal possible. The Warriors have a front office reportedly preparing for the next era of the franchise. The structure for something dramatic would finally exist. The only missing piece would be Steph Curry putting pen to paper, or choosing not to. Personally, here's how I see all of this unfolding. I think the Warriors will continue pursuing superstar opportunities, but they still won't sacrifice the premium assets required to actually complete those blockbuster deals. Just look at the pattern from this offseason. They recruited LeBron, monitored the situations involving Giannis and Jaylen Brown, dreamed about Anthony Davis, but consistently stopped short whenever the price became too steep. In today's NBA, acquiring superstars requires painful decisions and valuable draft picks. Golden State simply hasn't shown a willingness to cross that line. Steve Kerr reportedly wasn't comfortable with the idea of trading for Michael Porter Jr. 3 tradable first-round picks stayed untouched throughout the offseason, and the biggest move they actually made turned into only a brief Kristaps Porzingis experiment. Does that really look like a franchise pushing every chip into the middle? Because we've already seen what true urgency looks like from the Warriors, and this offseason feels completely different. When the Warriors have truly gone all in before, the results were undeniable. They signed Kevin Durant after winning 73 games, and more recently they aggressively pursued Jimmy Butler to strengthen the roster. That's what a franchise looks like when it's fully committed to chasing another championship. This summer, however, the biggest headlines involve signing a 40-year-old veteran and hoping an exciting rookie develops faster than expected. Those are 2 very different levels of urgency. And perhaps the saddest part of this entire story is that Joe Lacob can openly discuss preparing for life after Steph Curry, because Steph has never forced the organization's hand. Other superstars request trades, create pressure, or refuse to cooperate until they get what they want. Steph has spent his entire career doing the exact opposite. He recruits stars, plays through injuries, carries the franchise, and almost never creates unnecessary drama. For 17 seasons, Steph Curry has made life easier for the Warriors in every possible way. Yet while he's still averaging more than 26 points per game and earning all-star starting selections, the organization already appears comfortable preparing for the next chapter. That's a difficult reality for any Warriors fan to process. My prediction remains simple. I still believe Steph signs a new extension shortly after August 29. Rewarding the greatest player in franchise history is the easiest decision Golden State can make, and we've seen similar situations before. The Lakers rewarded Kobe Bryant with a major extension, even after his Achilles injury, while quietly preparing for the future. Sometimes great franchises honor their legends while simultaneously planning for the next era. But if August 29 passes without a signature, the entire conversation changes overnight. Every rumor we've dismissed as unrealistic suddenly becomes something worth monitoring. That's when speculation starts turning into legitimate discussion. And if that moment comes, you already know we'll be here breaking down every new development as it happens. So take one last look at the entire picture. Steph Curry, the greatest shooter basketball has ever seen, has spent 17 seasons building one of the most iconic dynasties in NBA history. He personally recruited LeBron James, watched Draymond Green turn down $27 million in pursuit of one more championship, and just days after that dream fell apart, stood in front of a youth basketball camp and described himself as a realist. At the exact same time, reports suggested Warriors ownership had already begun planning for the team that comes after him. Whether that's simply smart long-term management or the first signs that an unforgettable era is nearing an end is the question that could define the future of the Golden State Warriors.